This is Michael Fox, and this is the Prospector News Podcast. And joining me, I have Michael DiRienzo, the Executive Director of the Silver Institute, and we're going to talk about silver demand. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate it.
It's good to have you back on. Now, the Silver Institute just published a year-end update and a look forward into 2023. Let's start with last year. How were the silver markets last year?
Yeah, so thank you. Global demand, we reached a new high of about 1.24 billion ounces, which is up about 17% from 2021. And every key demand segment, apart from photography, posted highs. Now, we'll have final numbers on April 19th when we release our World Silver Survey. But to go through some of the numbers we have right now, we think that industrial demand grew by about almost 540 million ounces. This was due to ongoing vehicle electrification, solar panel installations, greater adoption of 5G technologies, coupled with some of these governmental commitments to green infrastructure. So where solar power comes into play and electric vehicles. So we think it was a great year for industrial demand. And we also saw good numbers for jewelry and silverware last year. Jewelry grew by about 29%, and silverware really surged by about 72%. And that was really primarily due to unprecedented rebound in Indian demand for both jewelry and silverware.
Yeah, that's an area of the world where silver is quite important. As same as gold, it's a way for families to ensure that they could get through bad times. It really is the true use of the silver and the gold.
Yeah, we just put out a report on Indian investment market just a few weeks ago, and there's just a built-in mistrust of the Indian banking system, and many Indians go to gold and silver, physical gold and silver, as in the hard asset form, as a form of savings and protection of wealth. But they are making some inroads with exchange-traded products and digital silver, and shortly, silver will be available on the IIBX, the Indian Bullion Exchange. So that'll be interesting as well.
Yeah, what kind of an impact do you think that would have with that? If they're trading in physical silver, would they would bypass the bullion exchange, would they not?
Well, yeah, but the gold, on the gold side, is having little penetration right now. But in terms of exchange traded products, these only really began in late 2021, and you already have about 8 million ounces of silver in the ETP holdings, which is quite dramatic. I think there's only about 1 million ounces of gold in all ETPs in India. But I do believe that whether it be bars or coins, or in some cases silver jewelry, that will be the form for any type of investment for at least the immediate future. That could change, though.
Yeah, the world's constantly changing, and as we learned last year, very rapidly. What effect did that Russian-Ukraine conflict have on silver demand?
Well, it's interesting to say, because I don't have the actual. I know there's been a ban on trading of gold and silver out of Russia. I know that the LBMA, the London Bullion Market Association, has been extremely concerned about gold and silver that's coming out of Russia. But I think the surrounding areas could have been somewhat affected. If you look at Poland, for example, one of the largest silver mining companies in the world is KGHM. And I think last year they were probably top 5. Let's see. Poland was top 6. No, they were top 5. Russia was in the top 10. And in terms of companies, Yeah, KGHM is the number three largest silver mining company in the world as of 2021. So look at there can and there probably will be some ramifications for the silver market. But I think more importantly, you have to look at countries like Peru, which is the world's third largest silver mining country, and some of the geopolitical issues they're facing there. I mean, it could be as bad or worse than they saw with the mine shutdowns with COVID. So we'll just have to see.
Now, we've talked a little bit about India and its focus. Everybody always looks to the big giant in the East, China. How important is China to the silver markets?
Well, I don't have numbers for 2022, but in 2021, they were the world's second largest mining country. And I don't know if that's changed. If it did, they're modestly then slipped to number three. China is extremely important to the global silver market. It both on the demand side, on the investment side, but also on the mine supply side. They don't have one huge deposit, but they have scores of minor deposits throughout the country that not just produce silver, but they produce obviously gold, tin, lead, zinc, copper, and so forth. So silver, like it is on the global market in China, when you're talking about mine supply, is primarily a byproduct, with about 70% of newly mined silver coming from byproduct sources.
Okay, well, let's take a look forward now. The report was predominantly about an outlook for 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And you were stating earlier that the demand side of the equation hit record highs in 2022, but you're seeing some headwinds that's going to hold that back for 2023.
We're seeing some headwinds primarily again due to India. If you look at the imports of silver into India last year, they were record highs. This year we're seeing slippage, okay? But we're only in the second month, okay? So we haven't even concluded the first quarter yet. So there's still a lot of room for improvement. So the report that we put out, where we sort of look at the trends of the global silver market for the upcoming year, we think that global demand in all aspects of silver could rest at about 1.15, 1.2 billion ounces, which would be a drop of some 6 to 7%. But that said, it'll still be the second highest level on record. And we will see strong gains in industrial demand, on the other hand. So they will be more than offset, though, by losses in the jewelry and silverware categories due to some Indian demand and, to a lesser extent, North America.
I see. What's the factors in India that seem to be holding back demand there?
I think what happened is after COVID, many consumers and so forth have already purchased their silverware and their jewelry, and that trend is not foreseen to continue at that level into 2023.
I see. So it's essentially a factor catching up from being locked down for a couple of years. Then is what drove it.
It was driven, it was driven by strong inventory replenishment ahead of the festive wedding season and heavy stock depletion in 2021.
I see. Okay. Now, speaking of COVID lockdowns, on the flip side, China is coming out of their COVID lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to see a large intake in demand in China for things like solar panels and the other
Yes,
industrial things? Now, is that going to
absolutely.
be enough to more than offset the loss of jewelry and silverware in India?
Well, we'll see, but we think that the restrictions on COVID, the removal of those, I should say, is good for the global silver market. It's good for the global markets in general. Quite frankly, they are a leader in terms of industrial demand, and the faster and sooner that they can get, back to full operations, the better off we are in silver. Like we said earlier, we think industrial demand is going to achieve a new record this year to roughly 550 million ounces. And I think these restrictions in China will help lead that way.
Now we have an environment now where the Fed keeps driving interest rates higher. We see inflation coming back again, so clearly they haven't tamed that beast. Are people accepting the new higher interest rate environment, and is that being reflected in the silver demand, or is that still a lagging indicator, and we're seeing some headwinds coming from that still?
Well, I mean, it's kind of twofold. All right. So you see on one hand, with the Fed, at least taking the US, for example, the US Fed has made it quite clear that it's going to continue on a pace to raise interest rates. We don't think it's going to continue at 0.5 like they have been. We think that number is going to decrease as the year goes on. But it does have an effect on price expectations as well as physical silver investment. I mean, last year we saw a big jump in physical investment, that bar and coin sales by about 18%, which was a new record. And that support came from investor fears of high inflation, the Russia-Ukraine war, some recessionary concerns, which are still around today, and some buying on price dips and so forth. So we'll have to see how this year pans out. But I think there's a whole host of geopolitical issues that are affecting not just silver, but the entire precious metals market.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with that. I openly wonder, though, with the inflationary pressures, a lot of that's coming from the energy markets. Now, silver is a key component to green energy. And if the oil price targets that I've seen come across my desk, which are upwards to $130 a barrel, come as early as April, May. What kind of effect will that have on the speeding up of the green economy? Will you see more government demand come into the marketplace to try and offset those higher energy costs?
Well, we had a very robust year last year in terms of silver's use in photovoltaics. And I don't have the exact number right now. I do have a number on installations. I'll just give you an example. They grew by 66% in China alone last year. That number is going to continue to grow in China. I mean, quite frankly, the commitments the governments have made throughout the world to decarbonization are not going away anytime soon. The number of electric vehicles on the road on a global scale last year was the highest on record. Silver is not used in the battery of electric vehicles, but it is used extensively throughout the vehicle in the form of contacts, electrical contacts, which help make those cars and even an internal combustion engine operate. As these cars become more and more sophisticated, Michael, more and more silver will be required. We put out a report early last year on silver's use in automotives, and we projected at the time that silver's use was about 55 to 58 million ounces. We think last year that's risen to about 63. And we think by 2025, that number will be at about 90 million ounces of silver. And it possibly could be even higher. But what you're seeing with respect to concerns about the high oil price, we all remember last summer what we were facing at the pump. Canada, I mean, throughout the world, quite frankly, United States and so forth. And you're even hearing today that wind power, nuclear power, and so forth could be increasing as well, but it's not going to increase to the level, especially on the nuclear side, that we have seen for solar. And in the summer, we are putting out a very thorough report on silver demand in photovoltaics with, I believe, a 10-year outlook, also for silver's use in automotives, focusing primarily on electric vehicles, as well as looking at autonomous vehicles and the role silver will play there. We're even going to look at nuclear power, and we're going to take a look at wind power too to see what role silver plays in those two components.
Yeah, well, it's certainly going to be a challenge. Now, we've talked strictly on the demand side of the equation. Now, the supply side of the equation, if we maintain these record levels of demand, are we capable of supplying them, or are we facing a potential supply demand imbalance coming?
Well, we did have an imbalance last year, as you know, and that was actually, I think it was 253 million ounces or so, and that follows a transition beginning in 2021 to a market deficit. We think that deficit may decline a little bit this year, but it'll still be exceptionally high. We do believe that mine supply will rise somewhat this year, maybe 3 to 5%, which would be its highest level since 2016. And this is primarily due to new silver projects in Mexico and the ramping up of production alongside increased byproduct output in Chile as new gold operations with higher silver content come online. So we'll have to see, but I think your question is there enough silver out there to supply the market? And I would say at this point, there appears to be. But I mean, I've read a lot lately, and I know you have too. These requirements for a green economy are going to put a lot of pressure on the metals market in general, and silver as well. And we'll just have to see. But I think you could be looking at higher deficits going forward.
Potential black swans, you're suggesting a shutdown in Peru is possible? Is that one of the black swans we could see this year?
I think it could be. I don't know if there's been an actual shutdown in Peru. I just know that it's very, very difficult in that particular country. And it's not just the major hubs, it's some of the mining areas as well. I mean, you're having rampant protests throughout that entire country. And quite frankly, I just don't know how that's going to end.
Just let's put on our, I guess not rose-colored glasses in this case, but our future-looking glasses. If that were to happen, what would the impact be on supply?
It would be significant. I mean, Peru mined in 2021 107 million ounces of silver, and that grew from about 101 million ounces in 2020. So I've read that supply of silver in Peru is being challenged right now. So we'll just have to see if that continues. As I mentioned, we're only in the second month of 2023. So I think we'll have a better understanding at the end of the first quarter and certainly by June or July of this year.
Other than Peru, do you see any other potential black swans that could put more headwinds, or white swans that could put some tailwinds into the market?
Well, in terms of black swans, I mean, let's look at Russia, for example. Further sanctions on Russia could impact the supply side. To an extent, Poland could be impacted as well. A lot really rides on what transpires this year as a result of that particular war. In terms of white swans, I think the good story about silver this year is its demand in the green energy transition. And so that's not a supply side issue. That's really demand side issue. And we're going to be talking extensively as the year moves forward on silver's role as a critical mineral. And that's what we're really going to be focusing on this year and beyond.
Perfect. So if people want to get a hold of your reports and yourself to ask questions, how would they do so?
Oh, absolutely. They can follow us on Twitter at Silver Institute. They can go to silverinstitute.org. And at the bottom right-hand corner, you can sign up for our press releases and our silver news. We put everything out at no cost. So if you want a hard copy of the World Silver Survey, I believe that comes at a small cost. But we have it in PDF format as well. All of our surveys dating back to the initial one in 1990 are posted online. And we put everything out for free. Our bi-monthly silver news will be releasing our February edition tomorrow. I highly encourage your listeners to subscribe because you'll get our press releases. But in the silver news, it's just interesting stories about silver. So to preview tomorrow's edition, we can talk about a story we have about how solar cells may use most of the world's reserves by 2050, according to an Australian study. We talk a little bit about our India investment report that we put out earlier this year. We're talking about some, in Europe, there's a concern about silver in general with other metals, and the study that we're reporting on about the current levels of silver in European freshwater bodies pose no health concerns, silver's use in photography, and so forth. So little stories, little anecdotes, and so forth that help talk about the global silver market and how important it is to our everyday lives.
Wonderful. I concur. I read that newsletter regularly as soon as it comes out. And yeah, your press releases are there, which I already get, but the other stories are absolutely fascinating. And it gives a wider viewpoint of silver than what you would normally see from analysts. So I look forward to your next reports and having you on so we can discuss those. So thank you for joining me.
You're very welcome, Michael. Call anytime, and I hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. The Prospector News podcast is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and are not to be taken as investment advice. Listeners need to do their own due diligence and seek advice of a licensed investment advisor.